Mob Truth, Sicilian Mafia. Origins Episode 1. Before the Mafia became an empire of blood and fear, before the streets of New York ran with mob money, there were two brothers, exiled knights from Spain, cast out by their own king, sent to a forgotten land where justice didn't exist. Sicily, ruled by corruption, broken by greed, left to rot. These men didn't come to build a criminal empire. They came to protect the people. They weren't mobsters, not yet. They were rebels, warriors, the first spark in what would become a fire that burned for centuries. You're watching Mob Truth. If you're new here, subscribe. And welcome, soldier. You're now part of the family. Let's begin. Arrival of the exiles. Sicily, the 16th century, a land of olive trees, stone villages, and fear. Under Spanish rule, the island was choking. The nobility taxed the peasants into hunger. Bandits roamed free, and justice was for sale. In the shadows of this broken land, two brothers arrived, not as tourists, not as conquerors, but as exiles. Banished from Spain for defying royal command, their names were erased from history, but the legend survived. They came with swords, silence, and scars. Two knights disgraced by the crown, but not broken. What they found in Sicily wasn't law, it was chaos. The rotten land. The brothers settled in the hills outside Palermo, where the air smelled of lemon trees and gunpowder. Locals lived under fear, not just from criminals, but from the very lords who ruled the land. Landowners sent armed thugs to collect grain, burn homes, and punish defiance. Foreign governors, drunk on gold and wine, watched from marble balconies while Sicily bled. There was no law, no justice, only survival. And for these Spanish knights, raised to fight for honor, this land was a battlefield that called them back to life. The first acts of honor. They didn't form a gang. They didn't ask for money. They began by protecting a widow whose land was stolen, then a farmer whose daughter was taken by a baron, then a village whose food was seized by tax collectors. Word spread, two strangers who stood up when no one else dared. Locals called them uomini d'onore, men of honor. They swore loyalty not to a king or crown, but to each other and to justice. The village that fought back. Their presence was quiet but heavy. They never shouted, never threatened, but people listened. The first village they helped was no one special, just farmers, widows, a few kids. But when a corrupt land agent came to seize grain, the brothers stood by the villagers, swords drawn, faces uncovered. The agent left limping. That was the moment it changed. No one had ever done that before, not against someone connected to the barons. Whispers spread like wildfire through the hills. And wherever they went next, fear walked behind them. But only if you wore a badge. A new kind of power. The Spanish brothers didn't have armies. They had presence, honor, a code. They offered protection with no contracts, no taxes, no threats. Their word was their bond. And in a place where no man trusted the courts, that meant everything. Soon others began to copy them. Men from nearby towns took up arms to defend their own. A movement was forming. But where the brothers led with discipline, others led with anger. And anger has a cost. The landlords strike back. The nobility didn't take the rebellion lightly. Sicily was already fragile. Too much resistance, and the island would slip from their grip. They sent hired thugs, mercenaries, and soldiers, loyal only to gold. The brothers were declared enemies of the state, but they didn't run. Instead, they did something that no peasant had ever done before. They rode straight into a land baron's estate and burned the ledgers. Tax records, fake debts, all turned to ash. It was war now. Loyalty has a price. With each act of rebellion, the brothers gained more followers, but not all who followed believed in honor. Some began taking money for protection. Some turned justice into revenge. A butcher in a nearby town killed a tax collector and claimed it was in the brothers' name. This was never part of the code, and the brothers knew if they didn't draw a line, someone else would cross it for them. The first betrayal. It came from within. One of their own, a local blacksmith they trusted, took a bribe from a landowner. He gave up a village's location, and the soldiers raided it that same night. 2 dead, 1 child missing. The brothers didn't speak. They rode to the blacksmith's shop and left his body hanging from the rafters. No one touched him. No one asked why. Everyone understood. Honor had rules, and those who broke them didn't get second chances. The hills go silent. After the hanging, the brothers vanished for weeks. No sightings, no word. Some feared they were dead. Others thought they had fled. But in truth, they were watching, testing the people they'd inspired, seeing who stayed true and who used their name for greed. When they returned, they weren't heroes. They were ghosts. They stopped leading from the front and began leading from the shadows. Orders were passed in silence, messages in bread. A symbol drawn on a door told you whether you were safe or marked. The bloodline of honor. The brothers knew their time was limited. The Spanish crown still had spies in Sicily. The barons wanted them dead. But they didn't care about legacy. They cared about the code, about planting something that could outlive them. So they trained the next generation, not to be killers, but to be guardians, protectors of the people, enforcers of justice. They passed down a structure with no name, just rules and silence. A legacy twisted. It worked for a while, but power always corrupts. The second generation demanded payments. The third sold favors. And within a few decades, the code of the brothers was no longer honor, it was business. The people still whispered their names, even if no one knew them. But what the brothers built, pure, silent, sacred, had become something darker, something permanent. The final conflict. The brothers knew their time was almost up. Soldiers were closing in. Informants were spreading. The Spanish crown had issued a silent bounty, dead or disappeared. But the brothers didn't care about escape. They wanted to finish what they started. In one last act of defiance, they marched into a government outpost dressed as merchants. No weapons, just words. They handed a sealed letter to the governor. Inside it, names, places, proof of corruption. It was their final message. We see you. The disappearance. A week later, they were gone. No bodies, no graves, just vanished. Some say they were captured and executed in secret. Others believe they faked their deaths and returned to Spain under false names. But in Sicily, the silence was louder than gunfire. People hung black cloth over their windows for weeks. No one dared speak their names. But the streets were never the same again. Something had changed. The next generation. The brothers had no blood family in Sicily, but they left behind something far more dangerous. A network. Young men they had mentored. Farmers, bakers, carpenters, all trained in the code. These men didn't see themselves as gangsters. They saw themselves as guardians of a land abandoned by law. And so, even without the brothers, the fire kept burning. Honor turned for profit. At first, the network protected villages, solved disputes, and stopped thieves. But the outside world was changing. The nobles were shifting power. Money became the new weapon, and survival now had a price. Soon, protection turned into obligation. Silence turned into fear. And the code? It began to rot from the inside. The shadows grow. By the early 18th century, the old stories were fading. But in the right barbershop, at the right hour, you'd still hear whispers about 2 foreign knights who once stood for the people, about honor, not profit, loyalty, not greed. But the men now running things, they weren't protectors. They were businessmen with guns. From legend to blueprint. Strangely, the legend of the Spanish brothers became a blueprint for those who twisted their legacy. New bosses referenced them when recruiting. They claimed to follow the old way, but they were liars. They used honor as a brand, but pizzo still flowed. What began as rebellion had become routine. What was once sacred was now for sale. The secret in the hills. In one small village near Corleone, an old man still tells the story. He says his grandfather met one of the brothers, a tall man with tired eyes, who carried a sword and never gave his name. The old man swears he saw a ring passed down, with a Spanish crest. Most call it nonsense, but every legend has a root. And in Sicily, nothing is ever completely dead, just buried deep. The weight of a name. To this day, no one knows their names, but every man who's ever claimed honor in the name of the Mafia owes it to ghosts they never met. Two men who didn't want money, didn't want fame, just justice in a land where no one else would give it. The real founders didn't rule with bullets, they ruled with silence, sacrifice, and shadow. And that is what made them unforgettable. When the people had no voice. The Spanish brothers rose in a time when people had no voice, no courts, no protection. If a landowner stole from you, no one cared. If your daughter was taken, no one listened. But when these two knights arrived, that changed. For the first time, the powerless felt like someone was watching their back. Not a king, not a priest, just two nameless warriors who understood that silence could be stronger than shouting if it was backed by steel. Why Sicily needed them. Sicily was always a battleground. Invaded, ruled, stolen, Greeks, Romans, Arabs, Normans, Spanish. Every empire used the island, drained it, and left its people to starve. Corruption wasn't the exception, it was the system. That's why the brothers mattered, because they broke that cycle, even if only for a while. They weren't heroes, they weren't saints, but they gave people something no government ever gave them: justice without delay. Their rules were simple. The code was unwritten, but clear. Protect the weak, never betray your own. Don't involve outsiders. No greed, no cruelty. If someone crossed the line, they disappeared, quietly, without drama. That was the difference. It wasn't revenge, it was balance. But once the gold came in, once politicians and merchants got involved, that balance was lost. The rules stayed, but the meaning died. The ghosts of the hills. Today in the hills near Corleone and Trapani, old men still tell the stories. They don't say names, just the brothers. Some claim they were seen in the 1700s, too old to fight, but still watching, like ghosts haunting the structure they once built. And even if it's a lie, lies that last 500 years tend to carry a bit of truth buried deep beneath them. The truth beneath the myth. Were they real? No one knows for sure. But whether they lived or not, their story lives in every oath sworn in silence, every favor traded with no paperwork, every handshake that means more than a law book. That's the real Mafia legacy. And it didn't start with a crime. It started with defiance. Two brothers, one island, and a legend that refuses to die. The echo that never fades. Even today, in the quiet corners of Sicily, where the stone roads curve like secrets, you'll still feel it. That echo, not of gunshots, but of purpose, of something that once stood for honor before it was twisted by greed. The Spanish brothers may be myth, they may be memory, but in every oath taken in silence, in every look exchanged without a word, in every deal that doesn't need a contract, that's where they live. Not in crime, not in fear, but in the belief that when no one protects the people, someone must. This was Mob Truth. Episode 1. The beginning of everything. Honor before blood, silence before business, and a code long before it was called Cosa Nostra. If you're new here, hit subscribe. Welcome to the family, soldier. You're one of us now. Next episode, we meet the first real boss of Sicily,